Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Aaron Carter's fingers flew across the keyboard, his eyes darting between multiple monitors as he put the finishing touches on his latest project proposal. The office around him hummed with activity, but he remained laser-focused on his work. As project manager, he took pride in his meticulous attention to detail and ability to juggle complex tasks. Glancing at his watch, Aaron realized it was past 7 p.m. He'd lost track of time again. With a sigh, he saved his work and began shutting down his computer. The day had flown by in a blur of meetings and deadlines. Now all he wanted was to get home to Lena and unwind. The drive home was a welcome respite after the intensity of the workday. Aaron felt the tension start to ease from his shoulders as he pulled into the driveway of the modest suburban home he shared with his wife of 8 years. A smile tugged at his lips as he thought of Lena. She was the calm to his storm, the warmth to his logic. Her yoga classes kept her busy, but he looked forward to their quiet evenings together. Entering the house, Aaron called out, "Lena, I'm home." Silence greeted him. He frowned slightly, remembering Lena had mentioned something about a late class. Shrugging off his jacket, he headed to the kitchen to grab a quick snack before jumping in the shower. As he passed the bathroom, something caught his eye. The trash can was overflowing slightly, a white stick poking out from beneath crumpled tissues. Aaron paused, a chill running down his spine as recognition dawned. With trembling fingers, he reached down and pulled out the object. A pregnancy test. Positive. Aaron's mind reeled as he stared at the 2 pink lines. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Just 3 months ago, he'd undergone a vasectomy. He hadn't told Lena, believing they were on the same page about remaining childless. Now, holding irrefutable evidence to the contrary, his world began to tilt on its axis. He sank to the floor, back pressed against the cool tile as his thoughts raced. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the test was faulty. Or perhaps, no. He pushed the thought away, unwilling to consider the alternative. Lena wouldn't betray him like that. She couldn't. But as Aaron sat there, pieces began falling into place. The late-night yoga workshops that seemed to run longer and longer. The way Lena's phone was always face down these days. Her growing emotional distance. "No," he whispered, the words sounding hollow in the empty bathroom. Rising on shaky legs, Aaron moved to the bedroom. He needed to think, to process. But everywhere he looked, he saw signs of the life he and Lena had built together. Photos from their honeymoon. The dresser they'd refinished as a couple's project. Her pillow still holding the indent of her head. Suddenly, the house felt suffocating. Aaron grabbed his keys and headed out, driving aimlessly as night fell. His mind churned with possibilities, each more painful than the last. By the time he returned home hours later, a cold resolve had settled in his chest. He wouldn't confront Lena. Not yet. First, he needed proof. The next morning, Aaron woke early, his sleep fitful and plagued by nightmares. He showered and dressed for work as usual, his movements mechanical. When Lena stirred, he kissed her cheek and muttered something about an early meeting. Instead of heading to the office, Aaron parked a block away from their house. He waited, watching as Lena left for her morning yoga class. Once she was gone, he let himself back inside. The house was quiet, almost mocking in its normalcy. Aaron moved from room to room, searching for what? He wasn't sure. A love letter? Incriminating texts? Part of him hoped to find nothing, to prove his suspicions unfounded. But another part, a colder, more calculating part, was already planning his next move. He was in the kitchen, idly straightening some papers on the counter, when he heard the front door open. Panic surged through him. Lena wasn't due back for hours. Had she forgotten something? Aaron froze, straining to hear. Lena's voice drifted from the entryway, hushed but clearly agitated. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she was saying. "I can't keep this up much longer." Aaron's breath caught in his throat. He inched closer to the kitchen doorway, careful to remain out of sight. Lena continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course, I'll tell him it's his. Nolan isn't ready for a baby. He might leave me if I push him for more. And besides, Aaron's always wanted a baby. It'll be easy to convince him. He's so naive. The world seemed to tilt beneath Aaron's feet. He gripped the doorframe, knuckles turning white as the full weight of Lena's betrayal crashed over him. Nolan. The name burned in his mind. Her fitness trainer. The man she'd sworn was just a friend. Lena's voice faded as she moved further into the house. Aaron stood rooted to the spot, his mind a maelstrom of emotions. Rage, hurt, and a cold, creeping desire for vengeance warred within him. When he finally moved, it was with a calm that surprised even himself. He slipped out of the house undetected, drove to work, and threw himself into his projects with laser focus. To any observer, it was just another day at the office for Aaron Carter. But inside, plans were forming, wheels were turning, and the man who entered that house would never be the same. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within Aaron. He lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, acutely aware of Lena's sleeping form beside him. Her gentle breathing, once a comfort, now filled him with a mixture of revulsion and pain. He waited until she left for her morning class before rising. Then, with methodical precision, he began to pack. Suitcases emerged from the closet, filling quickly with clothes and personal items. Aaron moved through the house like a ghost, gathering the pieces of his life. Family photos were left behind, too painful to contemplate. But his laptop, important documents, and a few cherished mementos made their way into the bags. In the kitchen, he paused. The pregnancy test still sat in the bathroom trash, a silent accusation. With a grimace, Aaron retrieved it, sealing it in a small evidence bag he'd procured for just this purpose. It might prove useful later. Next came the financial coup de grace. Aaron logged into their joint accounts, transferring every cent to a private account he'd set up years ago for emergencies. He changed passwords on all his personal accounts, erasing Lena's access in one fell swoop. As he worked, a cold satisfaction began to replace the hurt. Let her come home to emptiness. Let her feel a fraction of the betrayal he'd endured. With his belongings packed and loaded into the car, Aaron took one last look around the house that had been his home for nearly a decade. Memories assaulted him: lazy Sunday mornings, holiday gatherings, quiet nights curled up on the couch. He pushed them aside, hardening his heart against the onslaught of emotion. There was one final task to complete before he vanished from Lena's life. Aaron booted up his laptop, fingers flying across the keys as he composed an email. The recipient? Hannah Mitchell, Nolan's unsuspecting wife. The message was brief, clinical. Mrs. Mitchell, I believe this belongs to your husband. Sincerely, Aaron Carter. Attached was a photo of the positive pregnancy test. Aaron hit send without hesitation. Let the dominoes fall where they may. With a final sweep of the house to ensure he'd left no trace, Aaron locked the front door and walked away. He didn't look back as he climbed into his car and drove off, leaving behind the shattered remains of his marriage. Hours later, Lena returned home, arms laden with groceries and a spring in her step. Today was the day, she'd decided. She would tell Aaron about the pregnancy, spinning the tale she'd rehearsed countless times. He'd be thrilled, she was sure, and with a baby on the way, she could finally extricate herself from the mess with Nolan. Aaron, she called, pushing open the front door. I picked up some steak for dinner. I thought we could celebrate. Silence greeted her. Lena frowned, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. It wasn't like Aaron to be late without texting. She pulled out her phone, ready to call him, when something caught her eye. The house felt different, empty somehow. Heart pounding, Lena moved from room to room. Aaron's closet, once full, now gaped with emptiness. His dresser drawers hung open, picked clean of contents. In the office, his prized collection of vintage sci-fi novels had vanished from the shelves. No, Lena whispered, panic rising in her throat. No, no, no. She fumbled for her phone, dialing Aaron's number with trembling fingers. It went straight to voicemail. Text messages went undelivered. Emails bounced back, the account apparently deactivated. Lena sank to the floor, her mind reeling. How had he found out? What did he know? And where had he gone? As the reality of her situation sank in, Lena did the only thing she could think of. She called Nolan. Across town, in a tastefully decorated home office, Hannah Mitchell stared at her computer screen in shock. The email from Aaron Carter, a name she didn't recognize, sat open before her. But it was the attachment that had her world spinning off its axis. A positive pregnancy test, and the implication that it belonged to her husband. Hannah's hands shook as she reached for her phone. She and Nolan had been trying for a baby for years, with no success. Now this stranger was telling her that Nolan had not only cheated, but potentially fathered a child with another woman. As she dialed Nolan's number, a cold determination settled over her. One way or another, she would get to the bottom of this. And if what this Aaron said was true, well, Nolan was about to learn just how ruthless Hannah Mitchell could be when crossed. In a small, sparsely furnished apartment across town, Aaron sat on the edge of a rented bed. His laptop glowed in the dim room, open to a series of emails and documents. Bank statements, property records, text logs, all the digital breadcrumbs of Lena and Nolan's betrayal. He'd spent hours compiling evidence, building a case that would leave no doubt about their affair. It wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. No, Aaron's goal had shifted. Now, he wanted to ensure that Lena and Nolan's carefully constructed house of lies came crashing down around them. A notification pinged on his phone. An email from Hannah Mitchell. Aaron allowed himself a small, grim smile as he opened it. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, Lena and Nolan would learn the true cost of their deceit. As night fell over the city, for lives hung in precarious balance. Lena, frantically trying to reach both Aaron and Nolan. Nolan, caught between two women and his own web of lies. Hannah, steeling herself for confrontation. And Aaron, orchestrating it all from the shadows. The storm was gathering. And when it broke, no one would emerge unscathed. Aaron sat in his rented apartment, fingers drumming restlessly on the arm of his chair. The clock on the wall ticked away the seconds, each one bringing him closer to the moment when Lena would return home to find him gone. He imagined her confusion, the panic that would set in as she realized the extent of what had happened. His phone buzzed. A text from Hannah Mitchell. "We need to talk. In person." Aaron's lips curved into a cold smile. He typed back a quick response, suggesting a quiet cafe across town. As he hit send, another notification popped up. Lena. Her name on the screen sent a jolt of anger through him. He declined the call without hesitation. Across town, Lena paced the living room, phone clutched to her ear. "Come on, Aaron," she muttered. "Pick up, damn it." The call went to voicemail again. She let out a frustrated growl, tossing the phone onto the couch. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the empty spaces where Aaron's things had been. How had it all fallen apart so quickly? The phone buzzed. Lena lunged for it, hope flaring in her chest. But it wasn't Aaron. "Nolan," she breathed, answering the call. "Thank God. I need your help. Aaron's gone. He took everything. I think he knows." "Lena, stop." Nolan's voice was cold, clipped. "We can't do this anymore." Lena froze. What? What are you talking about?" "The affair, the baby, all of it. It's over." There was a pause. Then Nolan continued, his tone laced with barely concealed panic. "My wife knows, Lena. Somehow, she found out about the pregnancy test." "That's impossible," Lena whispered. "I was so careful." "Well, clearly not careful enough." Nolan snapped. "Do you have any idea what this could do to me? My reputation, my business, it's all on the line." Lena's knees went weak. She sank onto the couch, mind reeling. "Nolan, please. We can figure this out. The baby is not my problem." Nolan cut her off. "I'm sorry, Lena, but I can't be involved in this. Don't contact me again." The line went dead. Lena stared at the phone in disbelief, tears welling in her eyes. In the span of a few hours, her carefully constructed world had crumbled to dust. Meanwhile, Aaron sat across from Hannah Mitchell in a dimly lit cafe. She was an attractive woman, poised and put together, but he could see the strain around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched her coffee cup. "I appreciate you meeting with me, Mr. Carter," Hannah said, her voice low and controlled. "I have to admit, your email came as quite a shock." Aaron nodded, his face a mask of sympathy. I can imagine. And please call me Aaron. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Hannah's eyes flashed with a mixture of pain and anger. How long have you known? About your wife and my husband? Not long, Aaron admitted. I found out yesterday. The pregnancy test, it was like a punch to the gut. Hannah's knuckles whitened around her cup. Nolan and I, we've been trying for a baby for years. I thought. She broke off, composing herself. Well, it doesn't matter what I thought. What matters now is what we're going to do about it. Aaron leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. What do you have in mind? A cold smile played at the corners of Hannah's lips. I've been collecting evidence of Nolan's indiscretions for a while now. Financial records, suspicious transactions. I always hoped I'd never have to use them, but now you have no choice, Aaron finished for her. Hannah nodded. Exactly. And from what you've told me about your wife, it seems we both have a score to settle. As they bent their heads together, plotting their revenge, Aaron felt a surge of vindication. Lena and Nolan had no idea what was coming for them. Back at the house, Lena sat surrounded by scattered papers and open laptops. She'd been trying for hours to access their joint accounts, only to find them drained. Passwords changed, credit cards canceled. It was as if Aaron had erased her from his life with surgical precision. The doorbell rang, startling her. For a moment, hope flared in her chest. Maybe it was Aaron, coming home to talk things through. She rushed to the door, yanking it open. Aaron, the words died on her lips as she found herself face to face not with her husband, but with her mother, Bethany. Bethany Miller swept past her daughter into the house, her critical gaze taking in the chaos. Well, she said, her voice dripping with disapproval. I see you've made quite a mess of things. Lena's shoulders slumped. Mom, please. I don't need a lecture right now. Oh, I think you do, Bethany retorted, settling herself on the couch. Sit down, Lena. We need to talk about how you're going to fix this disaster. Reluctantly, Lena sank into the chair opposite her mother. There's nothing to fix, she said, her voice hollow. Aaron's gone. He knows about the affair, about the baby. He's left me with nothing. Bethany's eyes narrowed. Nothing? Don't be dramatic, Lena. You're carrying his child. That has to count for something. Lena's laugh was bitter. It's not his child, Mom. You know that. Details. Bethany waved her hand dismissively. What matters is what you can prove. And right now, you're a pregnant woman whose husband has abandoned her. Use that. Lena stared at her mother in disbelief. You want me to lie? To trap Aaron with a baby that isn't his? I want you to be practical, Bethany snapped. You've made your bed, Lena. Now it's time to figure out how to lie in it comfortably. She leaned forward, her voice softening slightly. Think about it. Aaron has a good job, a stable income. He'd make a much better father than that Jim rat you've been fooling around with. Lena felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. I can't believe you're suggesting this. Oh, grow up, Bethany rolled her eyes. This is the real world, Lena. You need to start thinking about your future and the future of that baby. Aaron may be angry now, but men come around, especially when there's a child involved. As her mother continued to outline her plan, Lena felt a growing sense of desperation. Was this really what her life had come to? Lying, manipulating, using an innocent child as a pawn? But as the reality of her situation sank in no money, no job, a baby on the way, Lena found herself nodding along. What choice did she have? Across town, Aaron was putting the finishing touches on his own plan. He'd spent the afternoon with Hannah, comparing notes and strategizing. Now, back in his temporary apartment, he opened his laptop and began to type. First, an email to his company's HR department, explaining that he and Lena were separating due to her infidelity. He requested that she be removed from his insurance and any other benefits immediately. Next, a series of messages to their mutual friends. He didn't go into detail, but the implication was clear. Lena had betrayed him, and he was cutting ties. Finally, he opened a new document and began to outline his case for divorce. Infidelity, financial deception, the works. By the time he was finished, Aaron felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The net was closing in. His phone buzzed again. Another missed call from Lena. Aaron's finger hovered over the block button for a moment before he set the phone aside. Let her stew for a while longer. He'd face her soon enough. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a mockery of the storm brewing in the lives of those caught in Aaron's web of revenge. He dressed carefully, choosing a crisp suit that radiated confidence and control. Today was the day he'd start to dismantle Lena's world piece by piece. His first stop was the law office of Patricia Hendricks, a shark of a divorce attorney recommended by Hannah. As he laid out his case, Patricia's eyebrows rose higher and higher. "Well, Mr. Carter," she said when he'd finished, "I have to say, you've certainly done your homework. With the evidence you've gathered, we should be able to push for a swift and decisive divorce in your favor." Aaron nodded, a cold smile playing at his lips. "That's exactly what I want to hear. How soon can we file?" Patricia's answering grin was predatory. "I can have the papers drawn up by this afternoon. Shall we say 3 p.m.? Perfect." As Aaron left the office, his phone buzzed. A text from Hannah. "It's done. I filed for divorce and alerted the authorities about Nolan's financial irregularities. The storm is about to break." Aaron allowed himself a moment of pure, vindictive pleasure. Everything was falling into place. Meanwhile, Lena's world was crumbling around her. She'd woken to a flurry of messages from friends, all expressing shock and disappointment. It seemed Aaron had been busy. Her phone rang. The gym where she taught yoga classes. With a sinking feeling, Lena answered. "Lena, it's Mark." Her boss's voice was strained. "We need to talk about your position here." Lena's heart sank. "Mark, whatever you've heard, I'm sorry, Lena, but we can't have this kind of drama associated with our studio. We're going to have to let you go." The call ended, leaving Lena staring at her phone in disbelief. In the span of 24 hours, she'd lost her husband, her lover, and now her job. What else could possibly go wrong? A knock at the door answered her question. Lena opened it to find a courier holding out a thick envelope. "Lena Carter?" At her nod, he handed her the package. "You've been served." With trembling hands, Lena opened the envelope. Divorce papers. Aaron was suing her for divorce on grounds of infidelity and financial deception. And he had evidence. Lots of it. As she sank to the floor, papers scattered around her, Lena finally allowed herself to break down. Sobs racked her body as the full weight of her choices came crashing down. Across town, Aaron sat in his temporary office, methodically working through his projects. To his colleagues, he appeared focused, professional. No one would guess at the turmoil roiling beneath the surface. His phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Aaron, please. We need to talk. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but please don't do this. I'm pregnant. We can work this out." Aaron's jaw clenched. He typed back a single line. "The child isn't mine. We both know that." He hit send, then immediately blocked her number. Enough was enough. As the day wore on, reports started trickling in. Nolan Mitchell had been arrested on suspicion of financial fraud. His gym was being investigated. Clients were canceling memberships left and right. Hannah had moved swiftly and decisively, using her connections in the real estate world to spread the word about Nolan's indiscretions. By nightfall, his reputation would be in tatters. Aaron leaned back in his chair, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. Lena and Nolan's carefully constructed lives were falling apart, piece by piece. But he wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. As night fell, Aaron drove back to the house he'd shared with Lena. It was time for a confrontation. Time to look her in the eye and see the realization of what she'd lost. He pulled into the driveway, steeling himself for what was to come. The lights were on inside, a warm glow that once meant home and comfort. Now, it just filled him with cold determination. Aaron stepped out of the car and walked to the front door. He still had his key, but he rang the doorbell instead. Let Lena come to him. After a moment, the door opened. Lena stood there, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, hair disheveled. She looked like she'd aged years in a day. "Aaron," she breathed, relief and fear warring in her voice. "You came back." "Not for long," he replied, his tone icy. "We need to talk." Aaron stepped into the house, his eyes sweeping over the familiar surroundings. Everything looked the same, yet felt entirely different. Lena stood before him, a mixture of hope and fear etched on her face. Aaron, she began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. Save it, Lena. I'm not here for apologies or explanations. His voice was cold, devoid of the warmth it once held for her. I'm here to make things clear. Lena's shoulders slumped. She gestured towards the living room. Can we at least sit down? Aaron nodded curtly, following her into the room. He chose to stand, unwilling to settle into the comfort of their shared space. Lena perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I got the divorce papers, she said softly. Good, Aaron replied. Then you know where we stand. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Aaron, please. We can work this out. The baby is not mine, he finished for her, his tone sharp. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise. But we could raise it together, Lena pleaded. You've always wanted children. We could be a family. Aaron let out a harsh laugh. A family built on lies? No thanks. He paced the room, anger radiating from every movement. Did you think I wouldn't find out? That you could just pass off another man's child as mine, and I'd be none the wiser? Lena flinched at his words. I made a mistake, Aaron. A terrible mistake. But I love you. We can get past this. Love? Aaron spat the word like a curse. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spread your legs for your fitness trainer. Lena gasped, the crudeness of his words a slap in the face. That's not fair. Nolan and it just happened. Things like that don't just happen, Lena. You made a choice, and now you're facing the consequences. He turned to face her fully, his eyes hard. Here's how this is going to go. You're going to sign the divorce papers. You're going to move out of this house. And you're going to leave me alone. But where will I go? Lena's voice was small, frightened. I've lost my job. I have no money. That's not my problem, Aaron said coldly. You should have thought of that before you decided to cheat. Lena stood, desperation clear in her stance. Aaron, please. I'm pregnant. I can't do this alone. For a moment, something flickered in Aaron's eyes, a hint of the man who had once loved her. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by steely resolve. You're not alone, Lena. You have Nolan, remember? Oh, wait, he sneered, I forgot. He dumped you as soon as things got tough, didn't he? Lena's face crumpled. How did you know about that? Aaron's smile was cold. I know everything, Lena. Every lie, every deceit. And I'm done with all of it. He moved towards the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. You have 1 week to move out. After that, I'm changing the locks. As he stepped outside, Lena's broken sobs followed him. Aaron didn't look back. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and strategic moves. Aaron threw himself into his work, channeling his pain and anger into productivity. His colleagues marveled at his focus, unaware of the turmoil beneath the surface. One sunny afternoon, as Aaron sat in his new apartment reviewing some contracts, his phone buzzed. It was Hannah Mitchell. Aaron, are you free to talk? He set aside his work. Of course, Hannah. What's up? Her voice was tight with suppressed excitement. It's done. The divorce is final. Nolan didn't get a penny. Aaron allowed himself a small smile. Congratulations, Hannah. How do you feel? Relieved, she sighed. And a little lost, to be honest. I've been so focused on taking Nolan down, I'm not sure what to do now. I understand, Aaron said softly. But you're free now. You can start fresh. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What about you, Aaron? How are things with Lena? Aaron's jaw clenched. Moving forward. She's out of the house. The divorce should be finalized soon. And the baby? Hannah asked hesitantly. Not my concern, Aaron said firmly. Lena made her bed. Now she can lie in it. After hanging up, Aaron sat back, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. Nolan was ruined, his reputation and finances in tatters. Lena was out of his life, left to face the consequences of her actions alone. He had won, so why didn't he feel victorious? Pushing the thought aside, Aaron returned to his work. He had a life to rebuild. Weeks turned into months. Aaron threw himself into his career, climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded determination. His personal life remained barren, but he told himself he preferred it that way. No attachments meant no chance of betrayal. It was a crisp fall morning when Aaron's carefully constructed new life faced its first real test. He was leaving his favorite coffee shop, briefcase in one hand and latte in the other, when a familiar voice stopped him in his tracks. "Aaron." He turned slowly, coming face to face with Lena. She looked different, thinner, paler, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly. For a moment, neither spoke. The busy street faded away, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of shared history and pain. Lena broke the silence first. How are you?" Aaron's grip tightened on his coffee cup. "Fine," he said curtly. "You?" Lena's eyes filled with tears. "I'm managing." "Aaron, I don't." He cut her off. "Whatever you're going to say, I don't want to hear it." He made to move past her, but Lena's next words stopped him cold. "The baby's a girl," she said softly. "I'm naming her Lily, after your grandmother." Aaron felt like he'd been punched in the gut. His grandmother Lily had been the only real family he'd had growing up. Lena knew how much she had meant to him. He turned back, anger flaring. "You don't get to do that," he hissed. "You don't get to use my family to try and manipulate me." Lena flinched. "That's not what I'm doing. I wanted you to know." "Know what?" Aaron's voice was rising, drawing curious glances from passersby. "That you're using my grandmother's name for a child that isn't even mine? A child you conceived while betraying everything we built together." Tears were flowing freely down Lena's cheeks now. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." For a moment, Aaron was transported back to happier times. Lazy Sunday mornings, playful banter over breakfast, the warmth of Lena's smile. But the memory was tainted now, poisoned by betrayal. He took a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Your apologies mean nothing to me, Lena. You made your choice. Now live with it." With that, he turned and walked away, ignoring Lena's broken sobs behind him. His coffee had gone cold, but he barely noticed. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions he'd thought long buried. Back at his office, Aaron found it impossible to focus. The encounter with Lena had shaken him more than he cared to admit. He was just considering calling it a day when his phone rang. It was Hannah. "Aaron, are you okay? You sound off." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I ran into Lena today." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh, how did that go?" "About as well as you'd expect," Aaron said wryly. "She's very pregnant." Hannah's voice was gentle. "And how do you feel about that?" Aaron was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Part of me wants to hate her, to hate that child. But part of you still cares," Hannah finished for him. "Yeah," Aaron whispered. "I guess I do." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Finally, Hannah spoke again. "Aaron, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. I don't know." "Are you?" Hannah's laugh was soft, a little sad. "I'm getting there. It's not easy, but I'm learning to live for myself again. Not for Nolan, not for revenge. Just for me." Her words struck a chord in Aaron. When was the last time he'd done something purely for himself, not out of anger or a desire for retribution? "Maybe," he said slowly. "Maybe it's time I tried that too." As he hung up the phone, Aaron felt something shift inside him. The anger that had been driving him for so long began to ebb, replaced by a tentative hope. Not for reconciliation with Lena, that bridge was well and truly burned, but for a future where he wasn't defined by her betrayal. The next morning, Aaron woke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. He dressed with care, choosing a suit that made him feel confident and strong. Today was the day he started truly moving forward. His first stop was his lawyer's office. Patricia Hendricks greeted him with her usual shark-like smile. "Mr. Carter, what can I do for you today?" Aaron took a deep breath. "I want to finalize the divorce as quickly and cleanly as possible." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "Are you sure? Given the circumstances, we could push for a more favorable settlement." "I'm sure," Aaron said firmly. "I don't want anything from Lena. I just want this chapter of my life closed." As he signed the final papers, Aaron felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was done. He was free. Leaving the lawyer's office, Aaron found himself walking towards the park where he and Lena had spent so many happy afternoons. But instead of pain, he felt a sense of peace. This place held good memories, and he was tired of letting Lena's betrayal taint them. He sat on their favorite bench, watching as families played and couples strolled by. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to imagine a future one filled with possibility rather than bitterness. His phone buzzed. A text from Hannah. "Dinner tonight? I could use a friend." Aaron smiled, typing back a quick affirmative. As he pocketed his phone, he caught sight of a familiar figure across the park. Lena was there, walking slowly along the path. Her hand rested on her heavily pregnant belly, her face a mask of sadness and resignation. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Aaron felt a flicker of the old pain, the old anger. But it was muted now, overshadowed by a new emotion, pity. Lena had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences, just as he was living with his. He gave her a small nod, not of forgiveness, but of acknowledgement. Then he stood and walked away, leaving the past behind him. That evening, as Aaron sat across from Hannah at a cozy restaurant, he felt truly relaxed for the first time in ages. They talked and laughed, sharing stories of their new lives and tentative plans for the future. "You know," Hannah said, taking a sip of her wine, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm almost grateful to Nolan and Lena." Aaron raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she nodded. "If they hadn't betrayed us, we'd still be stuck in those unhappy marriages. Now we have a chance at real happiness." Aaron considered her words. She was right, he realized. As painful as the journey had been, it had led him here to a place of strength and self-discovery. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. Hannah's smile was warm as she clinked her glass against his. To new beginnings. As they continued their meal, Aaron felt a sense of anticipation building inside him. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities. He didn't know where the road would lead, but for the first time in a long time, he was excited to find out. The next morning, Aaron woke to a notification on his phone. It was an email from Lena. "Aaron, I know you probably won't read this, and I don't blame you. But I needed to say it one last time. I'm sorry. For everything. I know sorry doesn't fix what I broke, but I hope someday you can find happiness again. You deserve it. Lena." Aaron stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, with a deep breath, he hit delete. He didn't need Lena's apologies or her well wishes. He was building his own happiness now. As he got ready for work, Aaron caught sight of himself in the mirror. The man looking back at him was different from the one who had discovered Lena's betrayal all those months ago. Stronger, wiser, ready to embrace whatever life had in store. With a confident smile, Aaron grabbed his keys and headed out the door. The sun was shining, a new day was beginning, and he was ready to face it head-on. The story of Lena's betrayal and its aftermath would always be a part of him, but it no longer defined him. Aaron Carter was moving forward, one step at a time, into a future bright with promise. And he wasn't looking back.